Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are back in, and we're going to talk about high dynamic range images, HDR pictures. Um, some of the samples that I'm going to show you here, we don't have in the class files because they're just too big to transport because they're already camera raw files or DNG files and they're huge. And it'll just take way too long for you to download them. But I'm going to show you if you have camera raw files that are at the different exposure levels, being able to bring them into the HDR Pro feature that's here within Photoshop and what that looks like and what that's going to do. And then if you don't have the multiple exposures, if you just have the one picture and you want to do the HDR and apply it to it, how does that look? So we're going to go through it in that format. And before we get through, I want to show you some examples of what HDR would look like on a picture, like kind of the end results. So this is, if y'all are into pro wrestling, you probably know who these two people are. If you're not into pro wrestling like I am, if you're not into pro wrestling, you may not know who these two people are. They're just two guys. But I blew this up big enough so you can be able to see it. Um, the picture itself probably wasn't taken with, any dynamic quality to it. Whoops. Good Lord, I just got rid of it. Wasn't taken with any dynamic quality, but let me reduce it down. The exaggeration of their skin tone, their muscle tone, the details within the little frills on his robe there, those type of things go into high dynamic range. Now, this is an example of something that's a little more towards the subtle end without going too extreme. This is another picture where the blurriness of the background was taken to an incredible amount first. So, like the focal length of the camera shot. So that was blurred down a lot. And then to accentuate the details that's within this gentleman here, HDR was applied, but it wasn't applied very harshly. It was applied very subtle. So this way it brings out details like in the hair of his beard and the glasses detail and things like that. Nothing too harsh. That's the aim that you want to go for. Not a real harsh application, but something that's a little more towards the subtle range that you're trying to create. So now, when you're doing HDR in your camera, I'm going to show you one example. These are some DNG files that hopefully will process and show up of the same scenery, just shot at different exposure levels. Um, and each one is going to take its own sweet time to show up, isn't it? Okay, let me not do it that way. Let me show you number three and get it to process. So number three here in this HDR group, there's 5 shots that were taken. So number three is the normal exposure. That's a normal regular exposure. And then, oh, as a matter of fact, these are not the ones that I wanted to show you. This is the one. Because I forgot that first set is a bunch of separate shots that need to be stitched together, not merged together. There's a difference. So this is like the regular exposure, the normal regular exposure. And then these shots were an increase or decrease in the exposure level to bring out certain details in the sky and the ground and that sort of thing at different values. It's the same exact scene, just at different exposure levels. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these into um, Photoshop to merge them all together so that way I get all the details and everything that I need out of the sky, out of the sunset, out of the this scenery here. So how do I go about doing that to make this work? So on those multiple exposures, you go into Photoshop without any file open like I got right now. I go to my file menu and go down here to is it automate or scripts? Automate. So automate and scripts are two different sections that have automatic processing happening where you can take a bunch of photos, process them all the same exact way. So under automate is merge to HDR Pro. That's what I want to go after. So when I do this merge to HDR Pro here, what's going to come up is just this little dialog box asking me where are the files. So that's the first thing I got to go do is find the file. So I'm going to go to Browse, and I'm going to navigate myself to where those HDR2 files are located. Let me do that. And like I said, you don't have access to these files just because of the size of them. They're kind of huge. HDR Pro inside of Jimmy. And I need HDR2 -1 to 2-5 and each one of those. So I can select them all together, hit open, it lists them all in order. The order really doesn't matter, but it's just because they're numbered like that it ordered them out. Just want to make sure you grab the right ones. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to grab one of these that are not supposed to be in this group because I want to show you one other thing. So if you happen to grab one or two extra, you can select it and remove it right here immediately. Or if you end up not paying attention to it, you can remove it later. And I'll show you what that looks like. Attempt to automatically align source images. You want to have that checked on so that way the computer will take a little bit of extra time to make sure that the alignment of the pixels are the same. So making sure that all the pictures as it's being stitched together, it's also aligning them properly because you want to make that happen, especially if you have a series of pictures that have like smoke or fire or water or anything like that in them. You want to try to make sure that that randomness that happens of those, that smoke and fire and all that, doesn't get too crazy with the alignment with things. So it tries to make sure everything else lines up. So you want to have that checked on. After that, you hit OK, and it will process. Now, here's what the process is going to do while this is coming up. It's going to give you a different interface to be able to work into, but it's going to import each one of the pictures into one file, get them all lined up with each other with the alignment, and then bring the interface up for you to set up the HDR Pro effects, where you can start adding in the exaggeration and everything like that. I'm working with a bunch of DNG files, so it's going to take even longer than if, say, I had a bunch of JPEG files or I had a bunch of TIFF files that I was working with here. If the files were smaller physically, if it was a lower resolution, it will work a little bit faster. So the thing to be careful about is if you got a computer that is not the fastest or doesn't process the most, or like me, you got too many things going on, too many things running in the background, this type of process can crash the program, can hang it up, or anything like that. So you want to be careful and not have too many things going on or running that's unnecessary. All right, so I think it's almost done with bringing in the pictures. Then it's going to do the alignment, trying to look at the pixels to see if it can line everything up, to get everything to line up properly. That one extra picture that was added in, it's probably going to mess up the process a little bit with things getting aligned. But when I remove that picture, it will kind of fix everything accordingly. So now, this is the new interface. It has that one picture of that mountain, and there's another mountain behind it, because that's the extra picture that was added in that was unnecessary. As you could see down here, what is this? This annotation thing. Hold on, something is just in my way, and I need to get it out of the way right now. Okay. I got this extra picture that was added that was unnecessary. It's this EV126, which I wish they would have these things because where it show you by the file name instead of by the exposure level, because that's what this is. That EV is the exposure level. But I can look and I can see that this is the wrong picture, so I can just uncheck that down there, and that takes that picture away, and then it just uses the rest of the pictures to give me the result. Changing this, there's no real dragging and dropping to change the stack order of the pictures. There's no right click to delete that picture out of there. It's just now that it's unchecked, it's not part of what the result is going to be. Now that I've gotten to this point, what I can do over here on the right hand side is all my settings. And this is kind of fun to an extension. The first thing is always check on remove ghosts. What that does is that it analyzes the picture and gets rid of any other ghost aberrations, any pixels that were not the same or in the same, or the information was not in the same place. Again, smoke, especially, water, especially, fire, especially, things that move a lot, wind affect things, and that sort of thing. It removes that. Also, if the trees or whatever else, moved, if there was a car that drove down this little road, because that is a road, if the car drove down that road, it would remove that because it's not in every one of the pictures in the same spot. So it would kind of remove it. So it does that sort of thing. Now, see this little, I don't know if you noticed, but this little halo glow showed up when I turned on the remove ghost because, um, it just took that dissipation and it wasn't, because the sun was rising, it took that out of there. So sometimes remove ghost is not probably the best choice to make, if you could make a different choice. So, turning these options on and off, it's always a good idea to kind of see. It looks like to me that remove ghosts, it got rid of the extra light refractions that were going on there. So it took that away, the smoothness of it away. So I'm going to keep that. So I'll uncheck it. The mode, you have really two modes that actually work. If you go to 8 or 16-bit mode, most of the same controls are going to be there. But if you go to 32, none of the controls show up anymore. And you have this kind of histogram look that really you don't really control anything but this little slider underneath. If you uncheck that complete toning in Adobe Camera Raw, it's like it just gives you kind of the camera raw treatment, and there's not much choices that you can make. So I usually leave this to 8-bit for this process, but you can go up to 16 and have the same setting available, especially when working with raw files. All right, so radius and strength. What is this for? So radius is the amount that is how far out the HDR effect is going to apply, but you really don't see anything until you increase the strength, because the strength there is for the edge glow effect and the adjustments on the highlight to the shadow result. So higher I go with the radius and the strength, the more you're going to see that result. Again, depending on the picture and what you're trying to get out of it, depends on what works. And again, everything works together. So with this edge glow, do you want that edge glow effect to be that strong? Yes or no? Do you want that radius for it to radiate out that far? Yes or no? It's up to you. You do have this edge smoothness, we can take some of the harshness out of the results. So if you go real high with the strength and the radius, that edge smoothness will kind of tone down it a bit, but really it's just kind of a choice on how extreme you want to go. Usually I'm not going too high with the strength. I may bring the radius up kind of high, but the strength I usually don't go real super duper high with it. And then comes the tone and detail. This is where the over exaggeration starts happening. You'll probably go with the detail first because that's the real exaggeration effect that happens. And you would, play with this value first to kind of bring out more and more detail in the picture and kind of exaggerate it a bit, and then start playing with the exposure and gamma. So exposure is what we've been talking about before, over or under exposing the image, and a little bit goes a long way. But then the gamma, I really like this because the gamma works as kind of like a front fill light to me, where if I increase it, it's like it's increasing the light value from the front of the camera, like what's directly in front of the camera, and then working its way backwards. So I can play with the adjustments of the gamma value and the exposure value along with the details, and it will start to give me, along with everything else, this real cool picture. And I'm playing around between this exposure and gamma, try to get as much detail out of the picture without it being really over exaggerated too much. Like I'm trying to make sure that this glow ring that's going around right here in the sky, trying to make that be as smooth as possible with what I'm doing. and with what I want to get out of the detail in the front of the camera. So now under advanced here, you have shadows, highlights, vibrance, and saturation that you can play with. The shadow value to kind of deepen, darken them down, or to open them up. Same thing with the highlights. This may help with the sky, with the highlight there. And again, everything works in combination. It's not anything isolated from one thing or another. Let's see, vibrance, saturation. We've already worked and talked about that multiple times. And look what that looks like in combination with each other. Get the color detail of the sky in there. Then you got this curve tab that's sitting there with advanced that is your color curve. And again, gives you the ability to kind of make adjustments accordingly. So again, you're not overexposing the color values too much. You're not underexposing them too much. Get a little more subtle treatment there. And I kind of dig the way this works. Now, when you get this the way you like, if you know you have multiple pictures that you want to try to apply the same exact effect group to, that's where the presets come in. So you'll be making a custom preset with everything, every choice that you make here so far, and you'll have the ability to right there where it says custom, instead of hitting the drop down arrow, hit this little button that's right next to it, and when you click onto there, you can save what you've done as a preset. So I can save this as a preset. It's going to be saved in a specialized folder, so don't change the folder location. Just give a name to it, whatever name you want to give it. And then once you've got that saved as a preset, if you hit the drop down, you have other presets that you can pick from. So that way you don't lose what you did before, prior to. And these different presets is just already made, ready to go. Some of these look good. Some of these are a good starting point. Some of these look terrible. It just depends on what you're dealing with or what you want to deal with. And yeah, some of these look real nice, and some of them look, just completely terrible. And no one is any better than another. It's just a matter of what you're looking at, how you're looking at it. Do you like this? You know, do you want to use it for this particular purpose? So it makes a very cool, highly dynamic picture. But again, even with the preset, you can kind of pick and choose what you do and do not like, and kind of play around with the values that you're getting. So that way you can further adjust and get something closer to what you like. Because again, nobody really says that this is the best way to go about doing it. It's just a matter of how well this is going to turn out. When you're happy with what you got, you saved what you made as a preset if you want to keep using it. Matter of fact, I'm going to save this one again because I kind of dig this look. And then when you hit OK to get out of this dialog box, it'll take you into Photoshop, everything stitched together. You get one layer of everything put together as the final piece. It's not turned into a smart object like we had with the camera raw filter. So you're just kind of stuck with this picture in the state that it's in. And usually, if you've gone into the camera raw filter, yeah, If you've gone into the camera raw filter before and set up anything, it kind of pulls in what came from that camera raw filter before. So this is the original pictures data information from the original DNG file. I just was checking on that to see what was there. So if I opened up one of these DNG files, any one of them in the camera raw filter, it would have that basic information already in there, unadjusted and that sort of thing. But this is what I got, on this picture here. So that was all 5 shots put together, modified, and turned into this. Looks decent, looks great. And I can work with that. Now, let me close this. I don't need to save it. What if I didn't have the multitude of pictures? What if I only had the one picture and that was it? And I wanted to do the HDR application. Can I do it? Short answer is yes. It's just a small little process that you have to do. So the small little process involved is because this filter, this camera, this HDR Pro filter has to be applied directly to the layer, and it has to be applied directly to a background layer. So the problem you're going to run into is that when you try to apply it to a picture, I'm trying to find a non-DNG file. I'll use Richard here. This is just easier to open up without it being a DNG file. So if I want to apply it to this picture, the problem I'm going to run into is that the filter has to be applied directly to the background layer. The problem with that is that I never like to do that. So step number 1, open your picture and immediately go to image and go to duplicate to make a duplicate layer, to make a duplicate image. It can't be applied to a protected layer. So you can't turn it into a smart object to try to prevent it from damaging. You're going to have to make a completely separate file. That's the best way to do it. So I'm going to call this HDR for now. That way I have 2 of the same files open, the HDR one and the original Richard HDR. So in the HDR file here, this is where I'm going to go to image. I'm going to go to adjustments, and HDR toning is going to be available. With HDR toning, it pops open this dialog box, which essentially is just those settings that were on the right-hand side of that HDR Pro interface. It's just the settings on the side with the same options here. You don't have the remove ghost because you don't have multiple pictures to work with. It doesn't have the bit depth choice because it's whatever the bit depth of this picture is. But you have everything else. You have the edge glow options, you got the tone, the advanced options, you even got the tone curve here, sitting there ready for you to use. And you also have the presets. And you can pick from any of the presets that you have created, or the ones that are already preset there. And you can work from there. So this is the preset that I made for that landscape, and this is way too much. I mean, his skin and everything looks way too terrible. So I can use this to kind of play around to tone down the detail a bit, maybe get the exposure, the gamma a little bit better situated. That looks better. Play around with this radius and the strength because that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting here right now. And then get in here to vibrance and saturation. So that saturation is not really overdoing it with the color. Yeah, about right there. Vibrance is there. Deep in the shadows. And you got this checkbox here for the preview that you can turn on to see kind of before and after. So you can see what's being accented, what's not being accented, what's looking good, what's not looking good. I'll need all of these tone curve points. Push that slightly up, put that one slightly down. Shadows over, more, deepen them. Do you see what I'm doing here with this? It's again kind of easy to do once you learn how some of these things work and you can visually see what's going on, and you can really create something that looks real good as you're working here. Making the highlights tone down a little bit because I don't like how crazy it is going in his face. Right. So now I could play with this, get this to what I want. I hit OK. This is permanently applied directly to this layer because I can't do anything past this. However, there is one extra thing that I can do once I apply this HDR toning to this layer. I can transfer this layer over to the original file. So that's the reason why you have it as, that's why I made it as a duplicate image, because now I can right click on this layer with the HDR on it, duplicate the layer, change the document destination to the Richard file, and I'll change this HDR toning filter. As far as the name of the layer, it's going to now transfer over to this file as its own separate layer. Now I can play with the blend modes. Because if I play with the different blend modes, I can apply that HDR toning that I did and apply it to different parts of, or apply it to the image. So that way it combines with the original. Depending on which one that I settle at, depends on how good or bad this looks. Usually, hue, color, luminosity, even. Sometimes those give you, wow, that is crazy. Sometimes those give you pretty good effects. Some of the others is kind of extreme. You may want to play with the opacity of it because it's applying too harshly, to what you want. But you can see what's going on. You can apply and get, a different look that you probably didn't have before. So that's the luminosity that's the luminosity blend mode applied. And this is before, this is after. Again, subtlety, you know, tones down the details in the background, pumps up a little bit of the detail within Richard, but it's not way overexposed and not way over craziness. I can make a crazy overexposed one and make it real surrealistic looking, and then still come here and apply it and tone it down by playing with the blend mode and opacity, seeing what I get. I can even do a layer mask if I wanted to. So I can apply a layer mask to this HDR toning filter layer. So that way I can take away and mask out some of the background effect change from what I did. So HDR is a very cool thing to be able to do. If you do it within your camera, you could take the different exposures one at a time. Or if your camera does the 3 or 5 shot burst, it can do that. And then you can take those multiple exposures, bring it in here, and then control how well it looks or how bad it looks in there. Or if you got the single picture, you can take the single picture and apply it and see what you get. And you just got to make sure you do the steps right. So if you're applying it to the single picture, image the duplicate to make a second, a duplicate image that you can then apply it to that background layer. Get the application the way you want, and then you could transfer it back over to the original picture to accentuate and add on to it, or go with it as it is. And some cases it's going to work great. Some cases it's not going to work great. It just depends on how you want to do it. Again, emphasizing one other thing, just want to show you this. If I have a regular DNG file, I'll use this clarity one here, and open this, it's going to open up in the camera raw filter. Through the camera raw filter, if you wanted an HDR effect, in this edit section up here, there is an HDR button you can click onto, and it'll give you the ability to, push the histogram around to get more of an HDR result. If you push the histogram around, that will do it for you. And again, you can keep it within, a subtle range, so that way you get a good looking shot. Another thing you can do is in the effects section, you have this texture and clarity, where if you increase the clarity and increase the texture, this is another HDR result. Usually, if you're for portrait shots like this, you're probably turning the texture down, because you can see a difference. If I turn it up, I can see the hair in her arms, and you can see the different imperfections on the face. Where if I turn the texture down, see, it gets rid of a lot of that, but turning the clarity up is making the picture that little sharper, easier to see kind of thing. Let's see, play with the texture a little bit more. The next thing is coming down here to detail. That detail section is where I got the sharpening. It has some extra options under the sharpening for noise reduction, for reducing the noise. If you want to try to play with that, it's just a process with it, more than anything else. But you also have, a radius and detail and masking that you can adjust for, besides just the denoise to help sharpen up things. That's an easy thing to play with, that you can work with there, and that will give you kind of an HDR, especially like with portrait shots. Some people like doing that. They like to come in here with a camera raw file, do the HDR effect. Turn on HDR up here, start playing with the histogram, but also playing with those three sections, the light section, with dealing with the light exposure and all that, contrast, going under effects and playing with texture and clarity, going under detail, playing with the sharpening and the options that you got there, along with the denoising and all that, if it is necessary. That's there. And then that's what they have. Then from there, they'll open that object up into Photoshop, and they got their HDR image, like they want. Options are there, and all the options are fun, because it will get you to the result that you want, and for the lack of a better way of calling it, it's cool. Well, I didn't show you the before and after. Let me go back in here. If you want to kind of see a before and after effect, you can go and you can see them side by side. Whoops, clicked on the wrong thing. Before, side by side. There we go. So this is the before that's on the left, and this is the after on the right. So you can kind of see that if you want to, when you're doing these particular things. Cancel, yes. Cancel and dismiss. All right, that's it for this section here. Again, if anybody has questions or needs some more information, please reach out to me by email. I will be available at my office for that, and I can answer whenever you send me the email and I see it, and I'll answer as immediately as possible. Thank you for being here, and I will see you at the next class. We got like 2 more weeks of lecture, and then we'll be getting in. You'll be getting your different projects that you have to complete. So make sure you get on those labs. If you haven't completed the labs and turned them in, get the labs done. Turn the labs in. That's part of your grade. Get the quizzes done. Turn those in. It's part of your grade. And we'll talk about, when we get down to this, the last lecture, I'll talk about the final at that point, what you're going to have to do with the final. All right. So I will talk to y'all later. Thanks a lot. See you later.